Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is December 31st, New Year's Eve around here, and we have a great show for you today. We got to start talking about all of the games that are coming up in the next couple of days. We'll break down the Peach Bowl first. We'll go to the Rose Bowl next. We'll finish it off with the Sugar Bowl. Just kind of roll through the Wednesday slate. Going to be incredible games, and we'll break down the first three just to start the show today. Then we'll get into a little talk around the quarterbacks going into the quarterfinal games. I'll give you my top 8, kind of rank these quarterbacks in terms of how much I trust them, likely in their system, but I'll break it all down in the fourth segment. Then we'll finish it off. We'll talk a little bit about of an overview in the quarterfinals. We'll talk about the best storylines, some players to watch on both sides of the ball. We'll talk about the most impactful upset and some injuries you're definitely going to want to be updated on before we get into this. But a lot of different things happening on today's show. But before we jump in, do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show. And the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, you can click that $, add any question, comment you'd like. It'll pop up on the screen and we can have fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be as interactive as possible, so utilize that and we can have fun back and forth here. But let's go ahead and jump into this one, and we will start with the one that's about 10 minutes down the road for me, the Peach Bowl between Texas and Arizona State, and it should be a very good one. I think all of us are very much looking forward to this one. This feels like the one that, if we are going to get an upset, probably would come here. Texas is a team that has struggled at different times, with turnovers and kind of giving teams some extra opportunities in games that they probably haven't earned. Arizona State is more than happy to take those and take full advantage of them, and mainly Cam Skattebo will be the guy doing that. And the big thing here is that matchup. One way or the other, someone's going to have to win it. Texas has the 9th best rush defense in the country. Georgia did have some success there, but overall, they've been absolutely locked down on that part of the ball. And then ASU has been absolutely incredible running the football with Cam Skattebo. They've only faced UCF, who was 29th in the country. That's the next best rush defense they've faced. It'll be interesting to see how much Texas can really slow him down. Now, he averages 4 yards after contact per carry. The kid can run through people. There's no problem with that. So Texas is obviously going to have bigger guys coming at him. They're obviously going to have to, give him a lot of gang tackling, because the reality is you're not getting this guy down with just one guy. He will run through you and continue on for at least 4 yards, maybe a little bit further than that. But going with that, actually, when you talk about this run defense or run offense for Arizona State, it's so incredible to watch. It's really talented. The question is the red zone. You do have a remarkable rushing offense. You also rank 114th when it comes to red zone scoring. So field goals are not going to win you this game. Against a Texas offense, especially with the back-end issues that you have that we'll talk about here in a second, you cannot give them extra opportunities. You cannot give them 3 when you could get 7. So once they get into that area where Texas is remarkably good at keeping people out of the end zone, we've seen it the last 2 games, or 2 of the last 3 games with A&M and then Clemson last week, they have to be able to put the ball in the end zone. If Kenny Dillingham, if the Sun Devils have to settle for 3 over and over again, you're going to see that lead for Texas just continue to grow. And on the Texas side, you have a lot of different things to talk about here. Obviously, the run defense is going to be a huge part of this, and their run game is going to be a huge part of it. But at the end of the day, if you're going to attack Arizona State, a lot of it's going to be through the air. They are much worse through the air than they are on the ground. In terms of run defense, they're top 25 in the country. Pass defense, they're below 70. So there is definitely more of an opening passing the ball around. The question is, how much do they lean on that? How much do they need to lean on that? This offensive line for Texas is very talented, one of the best in the entire country. How much do they feel like they have to lean into that identity, or do they feel like they can really just kind of let Quinn Ewers go out there and let it rip? Obviously, there's been quite a bit of talk between the two quarterbacks, really more Sam Levitt to Quinn Ewers, but at the end of the day, I think that it's, when you look at this Arizona State team, they are very solid against a ground game. They're not quite as solid when you come to a pass game that can be really prolific, and that's exactly what Texas has, as long as they can keep Quinn Ewers upright. And that's kind of the big thing in this game, where Kenny Dillingham and all of his assistants, they got to find a way to get pressure. They got to find a way to put Quinn Ewers off kilter, because that's the way you beat Texas. That's the way Georgia was able to beat Texas twice, was they were able to put Quinn Ewers in some weird spots. They were able to get guys backed up into his lap. He wasn't able to step into throws. He would make some mistakes. If you can get to Quinn Ewers, a lot of different things can open up for you in this game, especially if you have that run game going and you're not giving that Texas offense all the time in the world to go down the field and make all the plays in the world. So a lot of different things going into this. And if they can't get pressure, they really have to win the turnover battle. One way or the other, they're going to have to be able to force turnovers against this Texas team, and ASU has been one of the best in turnovers this season, only 8 turnovers from their offense the entire year, and then Texas has forced multiple turnovers in 4 of the last 5 games. It'll be interesting. Can Arizona State take care of the football? And then on the other side, can they take it away from Texas? They've been relatively good in that category, and Texas has given the ball away a number of times. So it's going to be one of those games that really comes down to a little bit of the margins. If Cam Skattebo can get going the way that he really has all year, if Quinn Ewers and that offense can really get their feet under him and start rolling, it's going to come down to a couple of plays, a couple of mistakes from Quinn Ewers, a couple of really good play calls from Kenny Dillingham when they very much need him, and I think it's going to be a really fun battle. I think you're going to have really good on really good when you talk about Cam Skattebo against this front seven for Texas. I think you have 2 of the best play callers in the entire country going at each other with Kenny Dillingham and Steve Sarkisian, and I think you have Quinn Ewers trying to silence the doubters. I think you have Cam Skattebo trying to prove that no one can stop him, like he said a couple of days ago. So it will be absolutely incredible to watch this game. I think a lot of people are circling this one as one to watch a little bit closer than some of the other ones out there. But overall, you're going to have to deal with a lot if you're Arizona State. If you're Kenny Dillingham, you got to get creative in this one. You can't just run at that defense over and over and over again because you've seen what can happen. You saw what happened against Clemson. You saw what happened against A&M. You run down the middle against this defense, even if you do have Cam Skattebo, who is absolutely incredible and will be able to run through a couple more tackles than some of the other running backs that Texas has faced. The reality is there's too much guys. There's too much dudes in there. There's too many big guys in there that are going to turn you back. So you're going to have to get a little creative in this game. And I think when you talk about players to watch, it's got to be Melquan Stovall. There's got to be tons of wide receivers in this group that are going to make different plays at different times, but this is the guy that can really change this game in a second. This is the guy that can get behind this defense, maybe make that one big catch, and then you look up at the scoreboard, and Arizona State's up 7 going into halftime. He is a huge player in this game, especially without Jordan Tyson on the football field. You got to have other guys step up. That includes him, Xavier Guillory, a lot of these really talented players that can absolutely step up to the plate. This is going to be the toughest secondary they've played all year. There's no doubt about that. And then on the other side of the ball for their secondary, Xavier Alford has to be huge in this game, especially in the first half. Shamari Simmons is going to be out for the first half with a targeting that he got called on in the Iowa State game. That means Xavier Alford and really everyone in that back end is going to have to pick up the slack just a little bit more. Xavier Alford playing his former team will have a little bit more juice to him, I have to assume. So it will be an incredible challenge for him when you have all of these remarkable wide receivers running around the place, and Quinn Ewers, who, if given protection, can absolutely dice you to pieces, especially without one of your leaders in the back end in Shamari Simmons. But one of the receivers you're going to have to worry about is Isaiah Bond. He's going to be back in this game, is fully healthy, is ready to go, and that is a huge thing for this Texas offense. They look very, very different when number 7 is on the field compared to when he is not on the field. He is a hugely important player for this team, and one of those guys that you just put the ball in his hands and you watch him go fly. He's a very, very talented player, and again, something that Arizona State has not faced all year. It is a type of wide receiver, a type of offense that they have not had to really encounter, and it could be a little bit too much for that back end of that defense that has struggled really mightily throughout the year. And then Vernon Broughton. He is the anchor of this defense. There's a million really good defensive tackles on this team, and they've done an incredible job replacing guys like Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy from last year. Vernon Broughton is the guy you're going to want to watch. Number 45, he's an absolute nightmare in the interior of that defense, and the reality is Cam Skattebo is a fantastic player, and he is going to make plays in this game. That is no question. If you make him bounce out of the intended gap, it could get a little bit sketchy pretty quickly. If you're making him stay behind the line of scrimmage longer than he's comfortable, then you have guys coming up to gang tackle. So that means getting push on the interior. That means Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins and Bill Norton and Jermaine Lole and all of these defensive tackles getting a ton of push on the interior. I just tend to believe that Vernon Broughton might be the best of the bunch. He's going to have a huge impact on this game, and definitely you will hear number 45's name called a number of times. But let's get to keys to the game, and we'll start with Arizona State. It's got to be the Cam Skattebo show. You're going to want to show plenty of variations off of Cam Skattebo. There's no doubt about that. You don't just want to set up and say, we're going to let number 4 just carry us to a win here, because the reality is you're probably not going to get a win that way. This Texas front 7 is just too mean, too aggressive, and too good to have that be your game plan. That being said, this is the guy that got you here. Much like Ashton Jeanty with Boise State tonight, ride your guy. You have to add variations off it. You have to keep that defense at bay, but the reality is number 4 got you here. I'd ride number 4 a lot of the day for tomorrow. And then find a way to get home. If you can't get pressure in this game, Quinn Ewers will do insane things in this game. He'll throw for 400 yards. He'll go for 4 touchdowns, and this game will be really ugly by halftime. Arizona State has 20 sacks on the year. For comparison, Clemson had 37 on the year. They got home once against Texas. So they're going to have to get a little creative. They're going to have to use their linebackers. They might have to use a safety or two and coming down in blitz packages, maybe a cornerback coming off a blitz package like Georgia did against Texas. So they're going to have to get creative. There's too good of an offensive line to set up and say, our 4 are going to beat your 5. They're just not. So you're going to have to find a way to get home. If you don't get home against Quinn Ewers, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country. And then make Texas play catch up. Texas has been very, very confident throughout the season because there hasn't really been that many times where they can dictate the game. There haven't been that many times where they've been really fully out of a game or really trailing for that long outside of those 2 Georgia games. So you're in a position where if you can get out ahead, say you get out ahead 10-0, 14-0 to start this game, then Texas looks up and they get a little bit nervous. Then Quinn Ewers looks up and he tries to force the ball just a little bit more. He tries to, put the ball into a window that might be just a little bit too tight, and then you get the mistake that you absolutely need. So make Texas play catch up. Play from in front in this game, and then make Texas kind of figure out how they're going to find a way back into this game, especially if they can't lean on the run quite as much as they might want to in this game. And then for Texas, get the run game going early. If you have a run game in this one, it's going to be really hard for Arizona State to slow you down. Now, Arizona State only gives up 117 rush yards per game, so they are very solid. There's no doubt about that. But Trey Wisner, Jaden Blue, those are the 2 most important players when you talk about this Texas title run, especially on the offensive side of the ball. If those 2 guys can have the game like they had against Clemson or even a little bit of a step behind that, they are going to be really, really hard to beat. They're going to be one of those teams that you look up at the end of the game and you've had a couple of possessions that have gone 3 and out. You have a couple of possessions that ended in fourth down stops, and you got 0 points. It's one of those teams that if they can control the clock, if they can control the run game, it's going to be a really long day for just about anyone that plays them. And then stay clean. That means keeping Quinn Ewers clean. That means having a 0 in the turnover column. That means just being the team that does not hurt themselves. Because the reality is, Texas is a remarkably hard team to beat if they don't hand you chances. And they have been pretty good about handing teams chances throughout this year. So if they can stay clean in this game, if they can make sure there's no sacks against this group that really does struggle to do that, if they can make sure that there's no turnovers from Quinn Ewers when he's, perfectly clean, if you can make the right throw, make the right read, and just live for another down, it's going to be really hard for Arizona State to fully slow down this offense. And then trust your back end. That's been the absolute strength of your team pretty much the entire year. You have Michael Taaffe, you have Andrew Makuba, you have Jade Barron. Malik Muhammad did have a tough game against Clemson. I tend to believe there's not quite the talent level at wide receiver that there was for Clemson for Arizona State in this game. So I wouldn't necessarily be overly worried about that. Commit yourself to stopping Cam Skattebo. If you stop Cam Skattebo, this offense is going to sputter very, very quickly, and it's going to be really, really tough for them to find any openings for those pass catchers on the back end because there will be guys breathing down their neck pretty much when the ball is snapped. So I think we got a great game here. I think we got 2 of the best play callers in the country. I think we're going to have some weird twists and turns. I think Kenny Dillingham is going to be very aggressive in this game if I had to imagine, but at the end of the day, I just think Texas is better. I think that interior defensive line is just going to be too much for them. I don't think Arizona State will be able to get home the way that they need to, and I really expect Quinn Ewers to have a huge day. So I'm going to go with Texas to win this one. I'm going to go with them to cover. I feel fairly confident in this one. I think that interior defensive line is too much. I think Quinn Ewers in this run game will be a lot to deal with for that Arizona State defense that has been really good this year, but has left a little bit to be desired in certain games that they have been tested a little bit more in. I think this will be the biggest test of all, and I think they'll come up a little bit short. It's been a remarkable run for Arizona State. I tend to believe it ends tomorrow around 4 p.m. or something like that. But let's move on forward to the game right after that, which is the Rose Bowl. We'll talk about that right after this break. A rematch between Oregon and Ohio State. Going to be a classic one in the granddaddy of them all. So we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Peach Bowl between Texas and Arizona State. I am going to pick Texas. I'm going to pick them to cover that line of 12.5. Going to be a remarkable game. Really love Arizona State. Think Cam Skattebo is going to have plenty of fun in this game. But at the end of the day, I do think that Texas run defense is a little too much. I think Arizona State not getting the pressure they need is going to be their doing. But at the end of the day, we got to get into the granddaddy of them all. We have Ohio State against Oregon, a remarkable game over there in Pasadena, and one of those games that you just can't wait for. It is a rematch from one of the best games that we've seen all year between these two up in Eugene earlier in the year, and that's kind of the big question that I have going into this one is, how much is carrying over from that first matchup? How similar are these teams to what they were the first time around in? Relatively similar. Now, the one big difference is that Ohio State offensive line. The offensive line injuries all happened after the Oregon game, so they're going to have to figure out a way to handle this D-line for Oregon with that new offensive line. They did an incredible job against Tennessee. Some of that was play calling. Some of that was just them coming ready to play and being really ready for that challenge. Oregon is the 34th best run defense in the country, has 40 sacks on the year. They are a very solid group up front. Jamari Caldwell is going to be a load to deal with. Mateo Uyunglele, you have Jordan Birch on the other side. It's going to be a lot to deal with. And not only that, not only the physical specimens that you're going to have to deal with on one side, but just the blitz packages that Tosh Lupoi has been able to send throughout the year, it makes things pretty complicated. So Donovan Jackson, he's out there on the left tackle for the first time in his career, has played really well the first couple of games. This is going to be a little bit different of one. You're not just going to have one-on-one matchups where you just have to beat the guy in front of you. You're going to have what looks like a one-on-one matchup, and then the guy stunts around and you have to pick up someone totally different. So it's going to be a little bit more of a mind game for this offensive line than it was for Tennessee and than it was really for any game they've played thus far, and I'm sure Tosh Lupoi is going to attack that offensive line with just about everything he has. Now, on the other side, the impossible task that Oregon has to deal with is these wide receivers. Ohio State is an absolute nightmare to guard, no matter how you cut it. Jeremiah Smith went for 100 in the first game, and Emeka Egbuka went for 93. They did plenty through the air in the first time around, and obviously, you're going to want to fix that if you're Oregon. Thing is, these wide receivers are playing on a different level right now. Jeremiah Smith played probably the best game of the year when he played against Tennessee last week, and Emeka Egbuka is not far from that Ohio State receiving yards record, so there's going to be a lot of juice in this game. And Will Howard probably playing his best game of the year, or best football of the year. Yeah, that was his best game against Tennessee. I think his second best game was against Oregon early in the year. So you're in a situation where you're going to have your hands full. There's no doubt about that. You have a Will Howard that is very confident playing the best football he's played. You have wide receivers that are a load to deal with on the outside, and you have running backs that are going to be insanely tough to keep track of for your linebackers. Now, on the other side, the Oregon wide receivers are going to be plenty to deal with for the Ohio State team as well. 149 for Tez Johnson the first time around, 75 for Evan Stewart, and plenty for Terrence Ferguson as well. So you're in a situation for Ohio State where you got to keep up with all these guys, and it's going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with. Now, both these run games, they are very talented. They have guys that can absolutely make game-changing plays. Overall, when you look statistically, they're relatively middle of the road, but you got Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins on one side, you have Jordan James, Noah Whittington on the other. You're going to be pretty successful. Very talented running backs nonetheless. Jordan James went for 115 and 5 yards per carry in the first time around. Definitely one of those huge things that you're going to have to watch. And then you also have Ohio State in the first game. Travion Henderson had a big time, I believe, 56-yard run, something like that. Outside of that, did not have a ton of success. So that's definitely something to watch, even without the O-line injuries. They really did struggle to kind of get that run game going the first time around. they're going to have to get it going in this one. They can't just assume that Jeremiah Smith's going to make all the plays in the world or Emeka Egbuka is going to be open all the time. They have to make sure that they can get that run game going. It's been a little bit of a struggle as of late, but once you get Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins downfield, they're a load to deal with. There's no doubt about that. And then on the Oregon side, I think Jordan James is the most important player for Oregon as they move forward. I think if they can get that run game to an elite level, if he can play really, really good football over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long they're still in this thing, I think Oregon's offense is going to be essentially impossible to stop. I'll be totally honest. I think it's going to be one of those things where you're looking around, you're trying to figure out all of the different ways that Oregon can beat you, and you forget that number 20 is in the backfield. He is going to be a load to deal with, and definitely is going to be one of those players that might not get all the trappings, might not get all the talk, but absolutely will have plenty to say about this Oregon national title run. This is going to be an incredible game. I don't think I have to say that. It's almost impossible to pick because I think these are the two best teams in the country. I'll be totally honest. I think you could look back and say that was a pseudo-national championship that was happening tomorrow. But at the end of the day, there's going to be margins that change this game. Both of them have really veteran quarterbacks that are playing the best football I've seen them play. Both have athletic pass catchers. Both have remarkable playmakers on both sides of the ball. Both have D-lines that are absolutely terrifying. I don't know which way you go in this one. I think it's kind of just throwing a dart at a dartboard and hoping that it sticks. But at the end of the day, it's going to be an incredible game. Ohio State's trying to silence all the fringe crazies, as they've been called over the last couple of days, and Oregon just trying to continue that perfect run. I think it's going to be a fight. I think it's going to be so much fun to watch, and one of the guys you're going to want to watch is the guy we just talked about, Jordan James, the most important player for Oregon in this game and going forward in their national title run. If he can get that run game going, if he can get 70 yards, 100 yards, especially in these games, they're going to be a remarkably hard team to stop. They're already really hard to stop with that pass game and Dylan Gabriel's legs. You add this guy as a very, very real threat, and he already is, to be totally fair. But at the end of the day, if he can kick that up just another notch, he's going to be absolutely terrifying. This offense is going to be absolutely terrifying. And then Jabbar Muhammad. He's been called out just a little bit by Jeremiah Smith this week, saying, you better not play man coverage because I'm going to beat man coverage. And frankly, I would say he's probably right. But at the end of the day, Jabbar Muhammad is going to get a lot of those assignments if they're in man coverage, whether it's Jeremiah Smith or Emeka Egbuka or Carnell Tate. He's going to have his hands full, and they need a big play in this game. They need to get Will Howard a little bit off kilter. They need to make sure that they get him a little bit nervous. If he can make one big play, if he can go out there, get one pick against man coverage against Emeka Egbuka, let's say, that's going to be a huge thing and definitely totally change this game. He's probably the best coverage corner they have, and he really has to act like it tomorrow. Emeka Egbuka will be on the other side of him for a number of those plays. He's not far at all from that Ohio State receiving yards record. Remarkable player, has been that way his entire career in. This is going to be a huge game for him. He's in one of those positions where a lot of people are talking about Jeremiah Smith right now. A lot of people are talking about number 4, seeing what plays he's going to make, seeing how he's going to impact this game. Number 2 is pretty darn good as well, and he absolutely wants to be heard from in this game. And I think when you talk about Oregon, when you have so much that is going to be going on in the interior of that defense, when you talk about that front 7, very talented, very diverse, very different in the way that they come after you, getting a guy that can just leak out on a drag route and then go for 40 yards is a really, really tough thing to guard. I definitely think that Emeka Egbuka is going to have a huge thing to say in this game, and I think him and Jeremiah Smith are just going to be nightmares to guard for Oregon. And then Denzel Burke. I've talked about this a number of times. Denzel Burke wants to get back on that field. He wants to get back guarding Tez Johnson in this game because it did not go his way the first time around. He badly wants to get that matchup again. He badly wants to prove that he can handle that matchup, and he's going to have his hands full. The reality is, when you look back at that Ohio State-Oregon game, there wasn't a lot really wrong with the Ohio State defense other than that back end. They let guys get behind them, particularly Denzel Burke, and he badly wants to right that ship. I think he can do it. He's going to have his hands full to do it. There's no doubt about that. And then for keys to the game, Oregon's got to throw the first punch in this one. Ohio State is really riding high. They have all the energy in the world. They have all the confidence in the world. It's partly because they came out against Tennessee and just buried them really initially. There was no question about where that game was going pretty much after the first 2 drives for Ohio State. Can Oregon kind of flip that script? Can they get up 7-0, get up 14-0, and then Ohio State looks up and they say, oh no, it's happening again. We're going to lose this game to this team again, and we're going to be out of this playoff, and then the doubt starts to creep in. You never really know how far removed these teams are from some of these bad moments until they get hit with one of those bad moments. And then use Dillon Gabriel's legs. This Ohio State defense is way too good to not attack them in literally every possible way you can. So that means Dillon Gabriel's legs. That means inside and outside runs. That means playing around with Noah Whittington as a end around guy, or using Evan Stewart as a jet sweep guy, or Tez Johnson, whatever that looks like. You have to find a way to attack this defense in every single way you have at your disposal. This is going to be a huge way, where this pass rush has been very aggressive over the last couple of weeks, has been very, very incredible. If he can scoot out and scoot for a big third down conversion, or even just 12 yards on a second and 20, it's going to be a huge thing. It's going to totally change this game, and it has a number of different times in his career. His legs have been really the story of the game. It absolutely could be in this one as well. And then attack the offensive line. As good as they were against Tennessee, it's still a big-time question mark as you head into this game. Oregon has 40 sacks on the year. Jordan Burch has 8.5. Mateo Uyunglele has 10.5. Go after these guys. Don't go after them one-on-one necessarily, but play around with different things. Use different studs. Use different packages, and really attack this offensive line, because the reality is I'd make them prove to me that they're ready to go. I'd make them prove to me that they can handle my group, and I'm not sure that they can. So really attack this group. Make them prove that that Tennessee game was not a fluke in any way, and really try to get after Will Howard early in this game. And then for Ohio State, keep that edge that they had against Tennessee, the Will Howard kind of swagger that he was walking around with. You're gonna need it in this one. This is a better team across the board, especially maybe not that defensive line, but overall, they got to set the tone. They got to make sure that they walk out there with all the confidence in the world. Maybe Jack Sawyer can talk a little trash before the game once again. I think their D-line is going to be huge in this game. Just kind of set the tone. Show everyone that you are the toughest group on the field, that you are going to be the group that totally changes this game. I just think Ohio State has to walk out with their chest held high and then really go attack to start this game. And then give number 4 tons of chances. Sometimes offense is complicated. Sometimes you have to play around with different schemes and different formations and different personnel groups. Sometimes you have Jeremiah Smith. The reality is this guy went for 103 and a score against Tennessee. He can do even more than that in this game. Just give him chances. Just give him 10 targets in this game. I don't even care if they're good targets. I don't even care if he's open. Throw the ball in his direction. He will make a play. I know that's not the most nuanced analysis you've ever heard. At the end of the day, Jeremiah Smith does not require nuanced analysis. You throw the ball up, he makes the play. That's the end of the story. And then at the end of the day, you got to eliminate yak yards. If they can get yards after the catch, you're in a lot of trouble. If you let Tez Johnson catch the ball with no one around him, he's going to make you pay. He averages 7.6 yak per reception. He is going to be a load to deal with, and they have to put these guys on the ground. So Caleb Downs, Denzel Burke, Lathan Ransom, all of those guys on the back end, they have their hands full. There's no doubt about that. But if you let that guy get that one catch on third down, make sure you put him on the ground, because if you don't, then he could run right around you, run for a touchdown, and then you're looking up at the end of the third quarter and you're down 14 because you let a couple of big-time players just get away from you on a couple of plays. So it's going to be an incredible game. It's about as good as you can possibly hope for in one of these games. It's two of the best teams, maybe the two best teams in the entire country. In the entire country, two really, really talented teams, two teams that fit the mold very, very well of what a national title team looks like. I'm going to go with Ohio State. I would love to give you plenty of reasons for this. The reality is I'm going to go with the guy that I think is going to make the biggest play, and I think that's Jeremiah Smith. I think he's going to make a huge play in this game. I think Will Howard's playing with a ton of confidence, and I weirdly think this Oregon train the wheels are going to fall off at some point or another. I can't promise that it's going to be tomorrow, but at the end of the day, I think Ohio State's coming in with all the energy in the world. I think they're going to be really tough to deal with, and I think Jeremiah Smith makes one huge play in this game that totally changes this game and possibly the season for Ohio State. But it's going to be an awesome one. It's a granddaddy of them all. It's two of the best teams in the country, maybe the two best teams in the country, some of the best players in the country, and it's going to be down to the wire. I can almost promise you that. It is going to be a crazy game, and I think Ohio State's going to come out with a win. I think it's really as coin flip of a game as you could possibly imagine. I'll go Ohio State for this time around. I'll ride down with the ship, and if Oregon ends up winning, I might just pick them to win my national title. But we'll get to that in time, obviously. Let's take our second break here. And when we come back, we got to get to the night game. We'll get to the Sugar Bowl between Notre Dame and Georgia, one of the more confusing and unpredictable games that we'll have the next couple of days. So we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Rose Bowl. It's going to be awesome. I cannot wait for that game. One of the biggest games of the year in the regular season. Have to imagine it's going to be absolutely incredible in the postseason as well. But let's move forward to that night slate. Let's move forward to what I tend to believe is the weirdest, most unpredictable game that we have in these quarterfinals, and it is Notre Dame against Georgia, because you got the biggest question on the board. It is Gunnar Stockton. How does he react? How does he play? Is he comfortable in this system? Is he not? How does Notre Dame attack him? A million questions around number 14 for Georgia. But at the end of the day, for Notre Dame, this is a message sender game. This is the game where you show everyone that I understand Georgia's on a backup. I get this might not be the Georgia team of usual. You still get to say you beat Georgia. You still get to say you walked into New Orleans, beat Georgia, and moved on to a game against Penn State or Boise State that you could very well win. It's going to be a really, really fun battle between these two teams, and if Notre Dame wins it, then could be kind of the sign of a new time around there in South Bend. But the biggest thing you're going to want to talk about here outside of Gunnar Stockton, and we'll get to that here in a second, but the Notre Dame run game is going to be a huge challenge for this UGA defense. I mean, Georgia Tech went for 300 yards, and Haynes King kind of led the way in most respects, and that's kind of the interesting thing about this one. The Notre Dame offense utilizes a ton of quarterback run with Riley Leonard, and that has kind of been an issue for Georgia throughout this year. The big-time question is, can he keep them honest with his arm? Because the reality is, a lot of those quarterbacks that they played, Jalen Milroe, Haynes King, Jackson Dart even, that had some success on the ground, they were able to throw the ball around. They were able to make those DBs be a little bit more nervous about that deep ball down the middle of the field than maybe Riley Leonard can. Now, I'm not saying Riley Leonard can't do that. He's just going to have to start the game hitting a couple of balls, beyond 10 yards, making sure that those DBs for Georgia really respect his arm, and then that run game can really take over. And on the other side, you have the toughest group you're going to ever have to deal with if you're Notre Dame. Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, Christian Miller, they are bigger than just about any player that you have had to move if you're the Notre Dame offensive line. So they've been incredible all year, that Notre Dame offensive line. They got to win a battle that is going to be the toughest battle they've had to win all year. There's no doubt about that. And then this guy right here, Riley Leonard, he holds the keys. If Notre Dame is going to get past this game, if they're going to get past the next game, if they're going to win a national title, it comes down to number 13. Can he make all the throws that he's going to have to make throughout this game and throughout the next couple of games if they're going to be able to win this one? Because let's be totally honest, Kirby Smart's going to be ready to roll in this game. Those defensive players are going to be ready to roll in this game, which means Riley Leonard's probably going to have to play the best game that he's played all year, the cleanest game he's played all year, and it's going to be a load for him to deal with. There's no doubt about that. But getting to the man of the hour, Gunnar Stockton, the guy that everyone has questions about going forward, and the biggest thing here is Gunnar Stockton is the question. I'm not sure he's the answer. I think the answer is just about everyone else. UGA has struggled with drops, miscommunication, blitzes, all of the different things you can possibly struggle with offensively. They've struggled with at different times throughout the season, and it's really kind of hurt Carson Beck at different times this season, especially during that month. There were a lot of drops, there were a lot of miscommunication, there was a lot of stuff that forced Carson Beck to be a little bit more forceful with the ball, be a little bit more pushing it into windows that might be a little bit too tight. That put them in bad situations. So everyone else got to pick up the slack. It's got to be Arian Smith not dropping any balls. It's got to be even the defensive side of the ball making better plays throughout this game and slowing down that run game. It has to be the tight ends making sure that they're blocking really, really well, pass protecting at an elite level. Everyone else just has to pick up that little bit of slack, because as good as Gunnar Stockton is, as talented as he is, and as good as I think he will be in this game, the reality is he's going to need help from everyone else. And it really does come down to Mike Bobo more than anything else. Indiana in that game didn't necessarily do a ton to help Curtis Rourke. They didn't necessarily help out the wide receivers and Curtis Rourke against that incredibly good back end with Xavier Watts, with Christian Gray, with all of those very talented guys. You have to help out your quarterback, especially in this situation. So Mike Bobo has to scheme guys open one way or the other, whether that's mesh concepts or that's leaking a running back out of the backfield, or it's using different screens and different things of that nature. You have to find a way to get this guy going. You have to find a way to get this guy open receivers, or it's going to be a really ugly day. It's going to get away from him in a hurry, and then you're going to look up in the fourth quarter and you're going to be down 21. You're going to have a first start quarterback trying to lead you back. So it's going to be a lot of different things kind of going into this game. But when you talk about some of the bigger storylines as you head in, a lot of them are injury based, and the biggest one outside of Carson Beck, of course, is Riley Mills. Riley Mills is the sack leader for this Irish team, the anchor on the interior of that defensive line. He is a problem to deal with one way or the other. He is going to be he would have been a huge player in this game, so everyone else has got to pick up the slack. Howard Cross has got to be huge. He's been a little bit dinged up. He played with a boot, played with a brace in that Indiana game. You have Donovan Hinnish, you have Joshua Barnum. You have very talented players on the interior. They're all going to have to play better football than they've played all year. There's no doubt about that, and both these coaches are going to have their hands full one way or the other. Marcus Freeman has to make sure that he's ready for pretty much anything that could be thrown at him. When you have a backup quarterback, when you're a little bit underhanded offensively if you're Georgia, you attack in different ways. You attack in a little bit weird ways, and sometimes that includes some trick plays. Sometimes that includes some things that you haven't seen from Georgia all year. The quarterback run game will be a big part of this. So Marcus Freeman's going to have his hands full, and then Kirby Smart's always going to have his hands full. There's no doubt about that. When you have a run game like they have over there at Notre Dame, and even on the offensive side of the ball, you have to make sure that Gunnar Stockton is ready to go. Mike Bobo will call plays. Mike Bobo will handle that part of it. But at the end of the day, you're the guy that has to give him all the confidence in the world. You're the guy that has to put him in a situation to succeed, and you're the guy that has to make sure that defense is helping him out along the way. So if Georgia wins this one, I think it'll be because the rest of the team prove that they are title good. They'll prove that even with Gunnar Stockton out there, they are going to be able to pick up the slack. They are going to be able to make all the plays in the world. And then for Notre Dame, if they win, I think it's going to be Riley Leonard proving that he is title good. I think it's going to be him proving that he can play against the elite defenses in the country and he can lead his team to a national title. So someone's leaving NOLA with a remarkably good shot to win the national title. Will it be Gunnar Stockton stepping up into the spotlight, or will Riley Leonard and Notre Dame kind of steal a show from those remarkable team that's looking for 3 out of the last 4 titles? Players to watch in this one, Trevor Etienne's huge in this game, because when you talk about the run defense for Notre Dame, one of the best in the entire country. Riley Mills obviously hurts that a little bit, but as you go through some of the different games that they've played in, shout out to Brooks Austin for kind of breaking this down a little bit more in a little bit more detail for me. A lot of those linebackers play a little bit too aggressive at times. Sometimes they'll jump a little bit over a gap that's a little bit too aggressive. This is the guy that can totally take advantage of that. He can hit a jump cut very quickly, get back into the opposite B gap, and then fly down the field. He's a very, very dangerous running back, and if these linebackers like Jack Kaiser and those guys on the defensive side of the ball for Notre Dame over pursue at any point in this game, number one is going to make them pay. I can almost promise you that. And then C.J. Allen, he is huge in this game. He is that linebacker in the interior of the field. He is the guy that is going to be chasing down Jeremiah Love and chasing down Riley Leonard and being the guy that kind of spies a little bit in this game throughout it. So he's huge. He's kind of that Swiss Army knife that they have at the linebacker position. And I think when you talk about all of the different things that you have to deal with for this Notre Dame offense, it comes down to that linebacker play. Him, Smile Mondon, Rylan, I'm forgetting his last name. Apologies. That linebacker group for Georgia is remarkably talented. I think C.J. Allen's going to have to lead the way in this one. Jordan Faison, he was huge in that game against Indiana, had over 100 yards, was kind of the answer to the prayer of what wide receiver is going to step up for Notre Dame. It was him that time around, and probably going to have to be him again. I don't necessarily know if they have a guy on that roster that's going to be really ready to go. I think they have guys that can make plays, and I think Mitchell Evans will be helping this out. I think Jaden Greathouse can make plays. I think Chris Mitchell can make plays. They need a guy to lead the way, and it seems like Jordan Faison's going to be that guy in the postseason. He's probably got to be that guy tomorrow. And then Howard Cross. We talked about it. Riley Mills is not going to go in this game. That means number 56 is the most important player on that defense. Obviously, Xavier Watts will have plenty to say about this game. I'm not worried about number 0, but number 56 on the interior is going to be huge. He's going to have to slow down that rushing attack for Georgia. He's going to have to, at times, get after Gunnar Stockton, get him a little bit nervous, make him know that he's there, and then maybe you get a couple mistakes from the kid. He obviously played really well to start the game against Texas when he came in. Didn't necessarily play all that well down the stretch, and that was when Texas really could pin their ears back and kind of get after him. Howard Cross is going to be a huge part of Notre Dame being able to do that. And then you got keys to the game. If this D-line for Georgia can control this game, it might get over pretty quickly, because the reality is that's what we saw against Texas. We saw a D-line that absolutely dominated the game, that said, we have to pick up the slack against one of these elite teams. We're going to have to play really elite football, and they absolutely did in both those games. They're going to have to do it again in this one. Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, Riley Leonard. It's a three-headed monster that's remarkably hard to deal with if you do not get push on the interior, if you're not able to handle the outside run for Riley Leonard. So that D-line's got to control the day. It's got to be those edge rushers and Jalen Walker and Michael Williams really controlling, and then Nazir Stackhouse needs to be able to hold his own against that offensive line. And then get Gunnar Stockton in a groove. One way or the other, you got to find a way to get him most comfortable in this game, whether that's running the ball a couple of times with him so he can get a couple of hits, really get himself kind of juiced up, or throwing a couple of screens, throwing some slants, throwing whatever makes him comfortable, and most importantly, making sure you're keeping the ball out of harm's way, making sure that you're putting the ball in the place that it absolutely needs to be, and making sure that you're giving Gunnar Stockton plenty of chances to go win this game for you. So, plenty talented kid. That's not going to be an issue for Gunnar Stockton. He's a very, very talented kid. You still got to give him some good chances. You still got to put him in chances to succeed, and especially early in this game, you're going to have to do that. And then everyone else picking up the slack. Without Carson Beck, the wide receivers have to play a little bit better. The offensive line has to play a little bit better. The running backs have to play a little bit better. And just for fun, the defense has to play just a little bit better as well. So you can't have any drops. You got to have great protection. You can't have a ton of penalties. You got to just make sure you play clean football, because at some point, this kid is probably going to make some type of mistake that Carson Beck wouldn't make. When everyone else picks up the slack, that doesn't seem to be quite as big of a problem as it could be. So it's going to be an awesome game for Georgia. And then for Notre Dame, get after Stockton. Just go after him pretty much from the jump. Obviously, missing Riley Mills, your leading sack guy, is going to hurt in this game. There's no doubt about that. But you got to get after this kid. You got to make sure that he knows that you can get after him in this game, and a couple of mistakes will come from that. You have too talented of a back end to really have to worry too much about that the wide receivers for Georgia, at least from a talent perspective. If you can get after this quarterback, if you can make him know that you're there, it's going to be really, really hard for him to not make a couple of mistakes in this game. And then dynamic quarterback run game. It's been a huge part of this offense all year, and it's really hurt Georgia all year. And it's kind of a twofold thing. You can't just run the ball. You got to be able to keep them honest on the back end by being able to throw the ball past them. But at the end of the day, Riley Leonard's going to be absolutely huge. And if they can force Gunnar Stockton to go punch for punch with Riley Leonard, you're probably going to have to lean towards the more veteran presence in that one. So that's going to be a huge part of this game. If they can get him running downhill, if they can get that three-headed monster rolling, this Georgia defense is going to have their hands full pretty much all day. And then if you give Riley Leonard time to process, he is going to be able to have success in this game. It's a very, very talented defense, probably the best that he's played all year, but when he's kept clean, 73% completion, 15 touchdowns, 5 picks. When he's under pressure, 42% completion, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. So Georgia's going to want to get after him. They're going to want to force those mistakes. Riley Leonard and this offensive line just have to make sure that he is upright and ready to make all the plays in the world, because at some point he's going to have to make a big-time throw in this game over the middle of the field, past Malachi Starks, past a lot of these talented players. If they think that he can't make that throw, that run game's not going to be a big deal, and he's not going to be able to throw the ball into those windows very confidently. So it's going to be a battle. This is one that I think is probably the most unpredictable one of the bunch, because it has the most unpredictable player in the entire quarterfinals in Gunnar Stockton, but I'm betting on Kirby Smart. I'm going to bet that Kirby Smart has that defense ready to roll. I think Riley Leonard's going to have a really tough time running the ball and possibly throwing the ball in this game. I think Gunnar Stockton will make just enough plays, and more importantly, I think those edge rushers for Georgia are going to be real problems for those tackles for Notre Dame. I think Georgia wins this one. I think they win a slugfest. I think it's going to be gross, but I'm going to pick Kirby Smart to get that win when he absolutely needs one. But going to be a remarkable game over there in New Orleans, a game that is just so hard to get a beat on. I'll be totally honest with you. I was going through this one trying to figure out which way I was going to go, and I think you just have to trust one guy over the other, and I'm going to trust Kirby Smart for the time being. I'm going to go down with the ship if I do, but at the end of the day, I think Notre Dame is very much alive in that game. I think they very much could win, and then they have a game against Penn State or Boise State that they would very much like their chances in. But we'll break it down in time. Obviously, we'll break down all of the reaction to that on Friday's show. But let's get to a little bit of a top 8 Tuesday. Let's break down the quarterbacks in these quarterfinals. I'll rank them from 8 to 1, break down all of the different things about them, and really tough group in the middle there to kind of break down. So we'll get to it right after this. Stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about that Sugar Bowl that is going on tomorrow night in New Orleans. Going to be an incredible game between Georgia and Notre Dame. I am going to pick Georgia. I'm going to lean into Kirby Smart. I'm going to trust that guy for the time being, but going to be an incredible game nonetheless, and absolutely Notre Dame has a real shot in that one. But let's get to some quarterback rankings. Let's break down how I view these quarterbacks as we head into the quarterfinals. Very hard group to rank. I think especially in the middle there, it's a really, really hard group to get a beat on because you have very, very talented guys. You have some guys that are more veteran. You have some guys that can run the football. It's hard to kind of figure out where all these guys fall, but the first one feels pretty good. Last time I ranked these quarterbacks, I did have Maddox Madsen below Stockton. I don't think that's really fair. I'll be totally honest. I think Maddox Madsen has played well enough football for me to give him a little bit more respect than I was. I'll put him above Stockton in this one, but I do think Stockton has all the ability in the world. I think he can do just about everything you need him to do in this offense. The problem is that defense on the other side for Notre Dame is absolutely mean. They're going to come after him very aggressively. The back end with Xavier Watts is about as hard to pass against any defense in the entire country. He is going to have a load to deal with in this game. Very talented player. He could be lifting a trophy at the end of this thing. That being said, he could also be going home at the end of it tomorrow night, and then this Georgia team is just wondering what would have happened with Carson Beck under center. So a lot of different stuff on this kid's shoulder. The amount of pressure that he is dealing with going into this game is just unreal, if I'm being totally honest, but he's one of those guys. He can make all the plays in the world, but this is unlike anything that he's ever had to deal with, and he will have his hands full in this game. I'll rank him here right now, and he definitely could move up just a little bit if he is able to lead his team to a win. Maddox Madsen is here at 7. This feels about right. A little bit more right than the first time around. This is a capable quarterback that can make some very nice throws. The worry that I do have is, can he carry any type of load in this game tonight? Can he possibly, if Ashton Jeanty is slowed down for the first quarter or the second quarter and you're looking up and you got to get a couple of yards on third down, can Maddox Madsen make that throw with his arm? Now, he can make plays with his legs. He can definitely extend. He can definitely get those plays that you're going to need at some point with his legs, but he's got to be able to fit throws into windows that he hasn't had to fit into all year. Just plain and simple. He's going to have to throw at really, really talented guys on the outside for Penn State and just hope that his guy comes down with it. So he can't make mistakes. He's been very good about that this entire year. This is going to be the stiffest challenge. Oregon might be the stiffer challenge, but at the end of the day, this is going to be a very tough challenge for him, and he's one of those quarterbacks that can make all the plays. I worry that if he's asked to make all the plays in the world, is he able to really step up to the plate if Ashton Jeanty is not a huge aspect in this game? And then you do have Sam Leavitt here at 6. I think he is an absolutely awesome player. He makes some very nice throws. He can create with his legs. Very tough player, kind of that gamer mentality that you absolutely love to have this time of year. The question that I do have is, does he have the comfort level in these type of situations that all these other quarterbacks might have, just a little bit more? He is a redshirt freshman. He's played really, really well throughout this year, but it is going to be his toughest challenge going up against that Texas defense. All the athletes all over the field, especially those edge rushers. It's going to be a load to deal with. I can almost promise you that. So you look forward to seeing what Sam Leavitt can do. I think he's a remarkably talented player and definitely a guy that maybe this year he can lead his team to a national title. Who knows? But especially over the next couple of years, is going to be a very talented player to watch. when you look at the rest of the guys in this tournament, he doesn't quite match up the same way that a lot of these guys do. I think it's going to be a really, really tough challenge for him tomorrow. He has all the ability in the world, but it's one of those things that does the mentality, or not the mentality, but does the maturity, does the confidence in his game get there the way that it needs to against a ridiculously good defense? And then Riley Leonard here at 5. This might be a touch low for some people, but at the end of the day, I still worry about Riley Leonard's ability to kick it into that next gear. I think he played remarkably good football against Indiana. I know the job is going to be harder tomorrow. I can absolutely promise you the job against UGA is going to be tons harder, and he's going to have to make throws that he hasn't had to make all year. He's going to have to be very, very confident, and especially if that run game gets slowed down, which is what UGA is going to sell out to do, it all falls on Riley Leonard's shoulders, whether that's him creating with his legs, whether that's him throwing a ball absolutely on a dime to Jordan Faison or to Mitchell Evans or to any of these wide receivers. He's going to have to make big-time plays. He's going to have to make plays that are championship-level plays in this game. I've seen him make very nice plays throughout the year. I have not seen him make those plays against Georgia teams. So that's where my worry comes in. I think he's a remarkably talented player. Cannot wait to see what he can do in this game. But at the end of the day, when I measure him up against the rest of the guys in this tournament, don't have quite the confidence that I would like to have with him throwing the ball downfield. Drew Aller, he drops just a little bit in my rankings this time around, and I'm a little bit more worried about him than I was going into this tournament. Now, very, very talented player, no doubt about that. He can throw the ball all over the yard. Frankly, I think he might do that tonight, if I'm being totally honest. But at the end of the day, I worry about the mental side of this. I worry when he lines up in front of maybe it won't be tonight, maybe it won't be Boise State, but say they get Georgia in the next round, say they get Oregon or Ohio State or Texas in the championship game. Does he have that thing? Does he have the ability to step up to the plate and say, I'm going to take over this game, this one is mine, everyone else do your thing, make sure you catch the passes, they're going to be perfectly there. He needs to have that in him. He needs to have that I'm going to take over mentality. Now, he has plenty of guys to help him out. That running back room is really, really talented. Obviously, Tyler Warren is the best tight end in the country. You got plenty of help. It's not necessarily it's all on his shoulders. But that being said, he does have to lead his team. He does have to be the guy that you look back and say, that's the best football I've seen him play. Probably has to be tonight, and then it definitely has to be in the semifinal and final if they're able to get to that point. So, very talented kid. Think the world of him as a football player. I do worry just a little bit when he gets up against these elite teams in this tournament. Is he going to be able to keep that level of play that he's been able to show against some lesser teams throughout this thing? Like, didn't play all that well against SMU, to be fair, but like I tend to believe he will show against Boise State like he has shown against some other teams throughout this year. Can he do that against Oregon? Or he did it against Oregon, to be totally fair. Did throw 2 picks in that game, though. At the end of the day, very talented kid. I think the world of him as a football player. I think he's going to be a problem next year. I think this might just be a little bit too much too early. Will Howard, he jumped just a little bit in this one. This is the best football that I've seen him play. At Tennessee, he was throwing the ball with as much confidence as I've seen him throw it with. He was throwing the ball into windows that I did not think he could throw into. Apologies. But I do have my worries when it comes to I really still worry about his arm. I think a lot of us still worry about his ability to make all of the throws in the world. Now, I think he can make plenty of them. That's not necessarily the issue that I have. But if that running game is fully stifled, if he can't extend a couple of plays with his legs, if he can't, hand the ball to Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins and say, go get me those 6 yards on third down, is he able to make all the plays in the world? I think the ability part of this is actually my bigger worry. I think the mentality part of it is not a worry at all. I think he has all the toughness in the world. I think he has all the energy in the world, and I think he's one of those guys that can really lead a team to a national title. He's one of the bigger wild cards in this tournament, as far as I'm concerned. He is known to make some mistakes, make some goofs, as some people call him, but at the end of the day, he's playing on another level right now. He's leading this team at another level right now, and maybe he can make all the plays in the world that he needs to make. He's a very, very talented guy, and the confidence that was oozing out of him throughout that Tennessee game just really got me loving Will Howard throughout the rest of this thing. I do have Quinn Ewers at 2. He is the steady hand to me, as crazy as that sounds. There has been a couple of issues with protection that have led to a couple of issues with turnovers for him, but at the end of the day, if he is given protection, he can play within this offense as well as really anyone can in any offense across the country. He is a very, very talented guy. The worry that I do have is those mistakes that absolutely can pop up throughout the game, but if he's given protection in this game against Arizona State, it's going to be a load for them to deal with. He's a very, very talented quarterback. He can play at a very high level. He's throwing the ball downfield at a much higher rate than he was early on in this year and really throughout his career. He's one of those guys that he can flip that switch on any given Saturday. He can flip that switch, become a guy that goes for 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, leads you to a huge win like he did last year in Dallas against Oklahoma State. He took over that game. He decided in that morning, he decided that he was going to take over that game, and boy did he. He was absolutely incredible throughout that one, and definitely is going to be a huge player for Texas throughout this game. So you look at Quinn Ewers, there are a million questions. Arch Manning is obviously kind of breathing down his neck, quote unquote, although I don't think it's quite as intense as some people like to think it is. He's one of those guys that can execute this offense. There's no doubt about that. He's been in it for a number of years, and he's the only guy in this tournament left that has CFP experience. He's the only guy that stepped into one of these stadiums and said, it's a neutral site game, you're playing for a spot in the semifinals for the CFP, and not really blink. He is one of those guys, and I definitely think when you get deeper in this tournament, that confidence will come out more and more. This is the number one guy, and I really don't have any question about it. I'll be totally honest. His comfort in this offense, his ability to make plays with his legs, and his confidence throwing the ball downfield is on a different level right now. He is playing really, really elite football. He's one of those guys that has everything at his disposal on that offense. He has a great play caller in Will Stein. He has two remarkable wide receivers in Evan Stewart as well as Tez Johnson. He has dudes all over the place. He can make all the plays in the world, and just for fun, he can run the ball too. He can make some plays with his legs. He did the first time around against Ohio State. He's going to have to do it this time around. There's no doubt about that. Very, very talented kid, and also a very steady hand. We talked about Quinn Ewers having all the experience in the world. Dillon Gabriel hasn't necessarily been in the CFP. He's played a lot of football. He's definitely going to be a guy that is not going to be fazed by a lot of these different trappings, by a lot of these different craziness around this game, all of the media stuff, all of the outside noise that is going to be happening around these players. It's really hard to deal with for a number of these guys. I don't think it's going to be hard to deal with for this guy. He's a very, very confident, very comfortable, very relaxed guy, and I think he's going to be as comfortable as can be when he walks into the Rose Bowl tomorrow. He was a Heisman finalist. He is very, very close, not very close, but he possibly could break that touchdown FBS record that Cam Ward just broke if he can win this game and move on to the next round. But overall, very talented kid as far as I'm concerned. He is setting the pace, and as long as he wins this weekend, he will be setting the pace in the semifinals as well, as far as I'm concerned. So really talented player, definitely the guy that I would pick above all the other quarterbacks. But this quarterback group is relatively tough to group up. I mean, you talk about that 5-2, so like Riley Leonard to Quinn Ewers. I think you could rank them really any way you want. It depends on what you prioritize. For me, it's just kind of going about your business, making sure you can execute the offense. I think Quinn Ewers has the ability to do that a little bit better than some of the other guys I talked about. Now, if you want a guy that can run the ball around, if you want a guy that can extend plays and make plays with his legs, maybe Will Howard or Riley Leonard is more where you lean. So it's a toss-up. These are very, very talented quarterbacks. Some guys that maybe aren't the best quarterbacks in the country, but absolutely can make a ton of plays out there. And the couple of wild cards in that group, I think Sam Leavitt is a very, very talented quarterback and absolutely can make some plays against Texas. I also think Will Howard is a guy that if he elevates his game to the way that he was playing against Tennessee, that's a team that could run away with the national title. As crazy as that sounds right now, he is a remarkably talented player, and if he puts it all together right now, it's a team that no one is going to want to play at any point, especially Oregon tomorrow. But at the end of the day, going to be an incredible matchup for all of these quarterbacks, and we'll probably figure out if I was right or wrong on these rankings here in the next couple of days. But let's take our last break here, and when we come back, let's just do a quick overview of all the quarterfinal games. We'll get to the best storylines in each game, offensive player to watch, defensive player to watch, impactful upsets. We'll give some injury updates and some different things right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just did my quarterback rankings. Have to assume there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me there. I think they're all really remarkable quarterbacks. That Riley Leonard to Quinn Ewers is remarkably hard to rank. I think you could put them in any order, and I'd probably agree with you. But at the end of the day, I do have Quinn Ewers leading that group. I have Riley Leonard bringing up the rear of that group. But very talented quarterbacks across this thing, and Sam Levitt is one that I just cannot wait to watch in that game in the Peach Bowl. But at the end of the day, let's do a little bit of an overview of all the things you need to be watching for this upcoming weekend. Let's start with some storylines. We'll go through all these games and all of these segments. We'll go through all the games and break down the biggest storyline, offensive player to watch, defensive player to watch, that type of thing for all of these games. And we'll start with the storyline tonight. It's Ashton Jeanty running to history. Let's be totally honest. All of us are watching that game, obviously, to see who wins, to see who moves on to the semifinal. But at the end of the day, I think we all feel relatively confident that it is going to be Penn State moving on, which means we're turning our attention to number 2 for Boise State. He's 132 yards away from history. He's 132 yards away from passing Barry Sanders' record, being the guy that's leading the way for all of college football in rushing yards in a season. Obviously, more games, I understand that, but still will be a remarkable feat. He's 71 away from passing Kevin Smith for third, 91 from passing Melvin Gordon for second. So he is not far off by any means from making a ton of history. Whether or not it's that number 1 spot, I don't know, but very well could get up to that number 3, maybe even that number 2 spot tonight. Obviously going to have a huge day. He had 133 yards when he played Oregon. That would be absolutely perfect this time around. If he could get to that number, then he would have the record, and he would go down in history as one of the best backs that we have ever seen. For me, when I'm watching that Texas-Arizona State game, it's just about the play calling. The offensive play calling in this one is going to be so much fun to watch. Kenny Dillingham and Steve Sarkisian are about as good as it gets. There's going to be tons of motion, tons of eye candy, tons of aggressiveness, especially from Kenny Dillingham in this game. He knows that in certain places they are outmatched. He's going to want to make sure that he has his guys ready to roll in. He's going to want to make sure that when they have that 4th and 1 or that 4th and 2, they're a little bit more aggressive than they might be in some other games. So I think you're going to have some great play calls in this game. I think you're going to have some guys that are running wide open, and you have to figure out how the defense missed them. It's just because these guys are that good. It's going to be awesome to watch this one unfold, and just for fun, you have one of the best defenses on the other side for Texas that Kenny Dillingham is going to have to deal with. Then you got the Ryan Day question. The reality is, it sounds like Ryan Day is safe. It sounds like he is not getting fired. It sounds like he wasn't getting fired if they lost to Tennessee. There will still be questions. If they go down tomorrow, every Ohio State fan and their mama will be yelling at the TV saying, fire this man right now. We do not want him as our coach going forward. Whether or not they'll get that, I tend to believe they won't. But at the end of the day, it is going to create questions around Columbus. He cannot lose this game, as crazy as that sounds. He cannot lose the Rose Bowl against the number 1 team in the country if he does not want his fans breathing down his neck. And then Gunnar Stockton spotlight. That is the biggest storyline as you head into the night game in New Orleans. How much of a difference is it from Carson Beck to Gunnar Stockton? We know that Gunnar Stockton has a little bit more athletic ability running the football. We also know Carson Beck is very, very confident in this offense and does such a good job going from read to read, making sure that he executes the offense in front of him. Gunnar Stockton might be a little bit less comfortable doing that. So this is going to be a huge moment for him. This is going to be a huge moment for Georgia because they win this game. They move on to the semifinals with still a shot to win 3 titles in 4 years. It would just have to be their backup leading the way this time. Offensive players to watch. Nick Singleton is so hugely important. We talk about Ashton Jeanty all day long, and we can do that for as long as y'all want because I love talking about Ashton Jeanty, but the reality is Nick Singleton could take over this game as well. He's a very, very talented running back for them. Probably one of the, maybe the best that Boise State has faced all year. Jordan James would give him a good run for his money, but I'd lead Nick Singleton in that matchup. I think he's hugely important for the rest of the season for Penn State. If they're going to make a run to the national title, possibly win the national title, they have to open passing lanes downfield. This is the way you do that, is getting that run game going with those 2 very talented guys, Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen. I tend to believe Singleton will lead the way just a little bit more. For Arizona State, the big question is those wide receivers. We talked about Melquan Stovall, how he has to make some big plays. Xavier Guillory has to make some huge plays in this game. He's kind of their 50-50 ball guy, definitely a guy that can go up and get it, and he's going to be playing some elite corners, probably the best corners that he's played all year. He's going to have to make some big plays. When you don't have a guy like Jordan Tyson there, it's all about kind of like that Gunnar Stockton situation. It's just about everyone else picking up the slack. No one has to be perfect. Xavier Guillory doesn't have to go for 150 yards and 2 scores. He does have to give you a little bit. He does have to give you something to worry about like he did in that Iowa State game. Noah Whittington for Oregon is a guy that I think is hugely important, and it's not necessarily like I think he's going to get 30 carries in a game and go for 125 yards and be the story of a football game. I do think he's a guy that can change the game in a second. I do think he's a guy, especially on kick return, that can be your down 7-0 1 second, you're tied 7-0 the next second, then you have all the momentum on your side. He is a momentum changing type running back. He can be in on third down. He can catch passes out of the backfield. He can return kicks. He can do everything you need him to do. And if Ohio State lets him break one loose, it's going to be really, really hard to stop this Oregon offense overall. Oscar Delp is a guy that I think is hugely important. Gunnar Stockton needs a security blanket. One way or the other, he's going to need a guy that he can just find that number, throw the ball in that direction, and trust that guy to go make a play. Oscar Delp has really been that guy down the stretch of this season. He started to make more and more plays throughout this season, and he's a really talented blocker. He can also go out and make plenty of plays. He's very, very talented, and you're going to need those tight ends to step up a little bit more than they really have all year. I think number 4 is going to have to lead the way in that category. For defensive players to watch, Sa'i Oladipo, very, very talented player for Boise State. He has 6.5 sacks from the safety position. That's absolutely ridiculous. So he's going to have to be the guy that flies down to the line of scrimmage, get those running back, get Tyler Warren on the ground, definitely fly downhill for a big-time stop on 3rd and 4th down. Maybe, just maybe, get a pick in this game. But the reality is you're going to need someone on that back end to kind of hold everything down because you're going to be blitzing a lot of different people in this game. Sa'i Oladipo is going to be one of those guys blitzing, but he's also going to be one of the guys that has to make sure this back end is fully ready to go before all those guys come down to the line of scrimmage and blitz 6, 7 guys. And then you might have a little bit of opening on the back end. He's the guy that would get everything in order before that would happen. Anthony Hill Jr., one of the best linebackers in the entire country, definitely the guy that is going to be meeting Cam Skattebo in the hole plenty of times and is going to be a very mean collision when they meet there. I can promise you that. He's a very, very talented player, one of those guys that plays with that chip on his shoulder that you love for your linebacker to play with. I think him and Cam Skattebo are two just immovable objects. I think they're going to go at each other very aggressively, and I think this guy is going to have to make all the plays in the world, not only on Cam Skattebo, but on Sam Levitt. When he leaves that pocket, very talented runner, this is the guy that could be running him down. Jack Sawyer, he is the leader, he is the game changer, he is the heartbeat of this defense. He might be the heartbeat of this team. He was talking a little bit of trash to Tennessee. He was able to back it up in that game. He's going to have to do the exact same thing. Dillon Gabriel, with no pass rush to worry about, is the best quarterback in the country. He will tear you to pieces. He will go for 300 yards, and you'll look up and you will have lost by 21. It has to be Jack Sawyer. It has to be JTT. It has to be all of those talented edge rushers, but particularly number 33. He's a remarkably talented guy, and he was the guy that took the Michigan loss the hardest. He played incredibly well against Tennessee. He's got to continue that in this game, no doubt about that. And then Xavier Watts, one of the best defensive players in the country, and just for fun, he's playing a quarterback making his very first start. He's going to try to bait him a number of times in this game. He's going to try to get Gunnar Stockton to make a couple of mistakes. He's absolutely an INT threat at any point. Really, really good at helping in the run game. He's one of those guys that if you just watch number 0 tomorrow night, you're going to have a fun time watching this game. He is remarkably, remarkably talented, and just for fun, he gets to deal with a quarterback that might be a little bit nervous going into this one. Xavier Watts will definitely try to take advantage there. Then we'll talk about the most impactful upset. This wouldn't be an upset. I will start with this one, and the next one wouldn't be an upset either. But at the end of the day, it would mean Oregon takes some chaos down to Columbus, just drops some chaos off there before they go home, and then it really does change the Big Ten hierarchy. It doesn't necessarily change it for a long time. Possibly Oregon could fall right back down next year, but the reality is Oregon would be the team that would be kind of leading the way for the Big Ten going into 2025. They could be on their way to their very first national title as well. So it would be an impactful win. I won't call it an upset necessarily, but it would be a very impactful win for Oregon. Definitely would cause chaos in Columbus and would cause a lot of joy over there in Eugene. For Notre Dame, again, would not be an upset, but what a win would mean for Notre Dame is really would be a game changer. I think it would be a program changer for Notre Dame because even around, we talk about it as fans all the time, that Notre Dame can never win the big game. They can't get to that big moment and take down the big-time SEC team or the big-time Big Ten team, or they can't just do that thing that elite teams do all the time, right? That's the big thing with fans. That's the big thing with recruits. You'll find that a lot of recruits will kind of mirror a lot what the fans think throughout these processes. So Notre Dame beating Georgia, Notre Dame being able to say, we beat the big dogs, we are moving on to play Penn State or Boise State with a title very much in reach. A lot of recruits will start changing their tune about Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame's a plenty advantageous place to go. Not necessarily saying recruits are avoiding that place by any means, but it absolutely will be kind of a changing of the tide, and will probably put Marcus Freeman on a huge success path going forward over the next 3, 4, 5 years over there at Notre Dame. Arizona State. This could change the way the Big 12 operates. I think people don't fully understand how good Arizona State can be, how talented that state is when it comes to recruiting, and how quickly they can get into Texas. They have some really, really talented recruiters on that staff. Brian Carrington probably the main among them that can go into Texas and get all types of players. If they win this game tomorrow, if they beat Texas, if they can say that we beat the team that just won the Big 12, walked off to the SEC, if they beat them, the rest of the Big 12 is going to be playing catch-up, especially with a guy like Kenny Dillingham as the head of that program. It's going to be a total changer for the Big 12 going forward. This would be the team that you would have to watch for to take over the Big 12 for the next decade. Very, very talented team. As long as Kenny Dillingham is their head coach, if they win this game, a lot of special things could happen in Tempe pretty quickly. And then Boise State. This would be the one. I think we all understand that. The Ashton Jeanty legend would continue to grow tonight if they were able to get a win. The Penn State questions around James Franklin would become more and more real, and it could be a real change to the way the CFP works going forward, because there has been a lot of questions. There's already talks about them taking away the auto buys for a lot of these teams. Boise State wins, then maybe they'll start to rethink that just a little bit more. Maybe they'll say maybe they do deserve that little bit of a bye. But at the end of the day, going to be a really, really fun game, and I think this would probably be the most impactful from a number of different perspectives of the upsets that could happen. And then we got to talk about injuries, and we'll start with the one tonight. Not a ton to speak of. I'll be totally honest. Penn State is going to be without Bo Parabola, obviously, in this game. And then Boise State will be out without Sire Gaines, who's kind of the backup running back for Ashton Jeanty. Probably wasn't going to get a ton of run in this game, if I had to be honest. But at the end of the day, it's going to be all Ashton Jeanty. It's going to be all number 2 pretty much every single play. So maybe that will wear him down just a little bit faster than it has in other games in the past. I tend to believe it won't. But at the end of the day, that's something to at least watch out for in this game tonight. And then tomorrow, for Texas, Isaiah Bond should be a full go. It sounds like he is ready to roll for the first time really in a month, that he's been really a full go, not like any restrictions or anything. Cam Williams is probably unlikely to go at right tackle. He's working out, trying to see if he can go, probably a game-time decision. I'd be a little bit surprised if he was going at right tackle. I think it will be Trevor Gooseby. Played incredibly well at right tackle the first time around. Obviously a very talented guy. Definitely can step in and play some really good football. No doubt about that, but definitely something to watch at that right tackle position. For ASU, Shamari Simmons will be out for the first half with a targeting call, but other than that, not really a ton to speak of. Obviously, Jordan Tyson won't be in this game, but overall, nothing really new for Arizona State in that category. For the Rose Bowl, Ohio State's O-line injuries have been well documented at this point. There's not really anything else out there. There's obviously some nagging injuries around that team, but overall, the offensive line is the one you're going to want to watch. And then for Oregon, their offensive line, Marcus Harper should be back at right guard, should be fully healthy at right guard for the first time in quite some time. He's been having nagging injuries really the entire year. He's been able to find his way back to the field and obviously will be full health for this one. Absolutely huge for that offensive line. And then a couple other nagging injuries around, nothing necessarily serious or anything that will keep players out of this game for Oregon. And then the one at night, obviously the Carson Beck injury for UGA and the Riley Mills one have been very well documented. Benjamin Morrison also for Notre Dame happened earlier in the year, but will be a big impact in this game. One new one is Roderick Robinson, the running back for UGA, will take a little bit of depth out of that running back room, so it'll be a little bit more Trevor Etienne, a little bit more Nate Frazier. Definitely something to watch. Roderick Robinson's kind of the punisher of that group. If he's not out there, then maybe you need someone else, Branson Robinson, possibly to pick up the slack in that category. But it's going to be awesome to watch all of this unfold. It's the quarterfinals of the CFP, the 12-team playoff, and we'll get to figure out if Rest or Russ is the winner. We'll get to figure out if Boise State can keep that thing going. Biggest thing here is just enjoy these games. It's going to be really, really fun to watch all of this unfold. Don't let anyone tell you that Boise State didn't belong or Arizona State didn't belong if they lose. Don't let anyone tell you that the SEC teams would have made it more fun if they were in it. It doesn't matter. This playoff is going on. Enjoy these games in front of you. Enjoy the atmospheres that we're going to get, and I think we're going to get a couple of games that are going to be downright classic. So I wouldn't worry too much like we had to in the first round. I think there are going to be plenty of fun games. Enjoy it all. be safe tonight for New Year's Eve. But thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people covering every single sport you could want. I know college football is at the forefront of our minds right now, but plenty of other things to get into on the GSMC Sports page. So go over there. We have everything in the world of sports that you possibly need to be covered. But thank you so much for listening. Be safe tonight. Enjoy all the games tomorrow. I will be back on Friday to break down all the games for you, but I'll see you then.